Hello everyone, it's Farket here, and this is part 3 of the full release update. And in this one's going to cover mostly building. No spoilers, so let's get started. Now they've added 2 new platform prefab structures and the ability to snap them to build structures. Now this is very good. It helps bridge the building between the forest and Sons of the Forest. It's probably the closest thing to the forest we've got. I'm not sure if it'll be classed as procedural building, but it's good enough. Now you can build a small platform and a medium-sized platform. Now you can't link them together when they're in a blueprint form. They have to be built first. Kelvin can help build these, and they can still be pulled apart. But once they're done, you can use other platforms and other structures to attach to them. Well, most structures anyway. And they can even be affected by elevation, so you can move them up and down, etc. Now, if you're placing them by themselves and you go up a certain amount of distance or automatically attach a rope, that's fine. If you don't want it, you just take it off. Keep in mind, the higher you go, the more expensive it's going to be. And the max height you can have these things is 5, but you can stack them on top of each other. Though, how you're going to get up there to put more on, I'm not sure. Probably a rope bridge. Now, most people probably think this is just another structure. It's not. You can actually make it do things that you normally couldn't, like placing platforms on the edge of a cliff. Normally, you wouldn't be able to do this very well. You'd have to do some major stuffing around to get it to work. And the good thing about it being a blueprint is that you don't need to reach the faraway places. As long as you can reach the closest point, you can place the log on it. So it's probably the least realistic building thing they've added in this game, but that's probably why it's so good, because their focus on realism can be a real pain. Here's another very good perk about it, is that it's going to make it very easy to build on water. Now, normally you can build on lakes and ponds during winter, and I still recommend you do that if you want to build on the lakes or ponds, mainly because you won't use as many logs. The foundation will only go as far as the ice, and when the ice melts, it will extend all the way down. So you get free logs basically. Though if you want to adjust the heights that you can work at, then you can do it this way. It's going to be much easier to build like this. And one of the best things about it is that you can now make sea bases, though you will have to build quite far out. And it would be quite expensive. It's around 12 to 13 logs for each piece. And just to show you, I'm fair way out at the sea, and I'm placing logs on it, and it's building just fine. It's just getting the logs out here that's going to be the annoying part. Though Kelvin could help with that probably. You're probably better off using zip lines than a log holder. Just so you know, if you're doing this kind of stuff, and you make an accident like this, you are in for a bad time. Because I had instant book build, I couldn't remove what was underneath. So yeah, I probably could actually if I swam down. I didn't think of that. Next is that they've added a new auto foundation system for prefab structures such as a small cabin, the lean-to, the lookout tower, and the platforms that I just mentioned. This is another thing that helps bridge the game between the forest and Sons of the Forest, because you could do this with the cabins and stuff, the procedural building. I'm really glad they're bringing it back, because not only is it really useful, it gives a lot more freedom to build, a lot more ways to build, and you can get Kelvin to build these things. And it helps with the planning process of building. You're not stuck doing one thing at a time, one log at a time. You can plan bases much better now. Now, something I found that wasn't that great about it is that it was hard to adjust the height of the foundations when attaching to them. Or platforms, I forget what they're called. It was hard to attach the platforms to some of these prefabs. There's no real height adjustment system for them. So for example, the lean-to, it was better to attach the lean-to to a platform rather than the other way around. This doesn't use excess logs either. The game recognizes what's there. It's a very cool system. You can even build platforms off tree houses and stuff. Speaking of tree structures, there's something I would like to see, and that is to attach tree structures to the top of these platforms. Like this one in particular, Tree Platform 2, has the pieces that stick out. They're a real pain to make. You have to build all the way up on one side just to put them on, and then you tear it all down again. It would be so cool to be able to attach this to normal buildings, not just trees. Same with the other tree houses. Not sure how they'll do it, but I'd like to see it. Next is that they've added 4 new findable blueprint structures, including a glider launcher and 3 mystery structures. Now, because the mystery structures are spoiler territory, I'm going to leave them out and put them in the spoiler video. It's for end game content, but the glider launcher can be found in this cave here, if you can see on the map. It's just inside, it's not a big cave, there's no enemies down there. And once you build it, it's like a platform with a ramp and 4 turtle shells that are mixed together. And you can actually take it off the platform. I don't know why it comes with a platform actually, that it's set up like this, but it launches you very far into the air, and I wouldn't recommend using it unless you got a glider on you. If you do have a glider on you and you don't have it equipped, if it's not hotkeyed, you can't use it while you're in the middle of the air. So what I would do is set it for 0. So if you get launched in the air, you just press 0 and you'll activate the glider. And also, if you do toggle your glider to a hotkey, if you fall off a cliff or jump off one, you can hit the glider key and you should survive. I tested the glider launcher on enemies to see if it launched them up really high, It just works like a normal spring trap. It'll still kill them, but it won't work on anything big like mutants and stuff like that, or the big fellas. Use it to get up on cliffs and such, or you can use it to get up on top of really tall buildings. Something I noticed is that it won't attach to the new platform structures, which is unfortunate, but the platform structures will attach to it. I'm sure this will be fixed in future patches. Now, I tested how high it can actually go, and what I figured out is that it will always go at least 15 high, 15 cubes high, or 15 sections high. I don't even know what to call it. But occasionally it will launch you much higher, and I don't know what causes that to happen. It's not a big deal, I don't think, as long as you don't fall all the way down, I suppose. I think if you fell from that distance, it might kill you. Next is that they've added a new nice chair and nice couch buildable structures. They're just called chair and couch. They should put the word nice in front of them. Now, these are utility structures and decorative. If you sit on them, your energy will go up slowly, but I can't stress how slow that is, but it's still free energy. But they look better than the standard stuff, and they look much better than the gore couches and the gore chair. And just to show you, here's the nice chair versus the bone chair and normal chair. Next is that they've added a new trap. It's an explosive tripwire. Now, this is basically just a wire and a grenade, and it's a single-use trap. Your companions, Calvin and Virginia, won't trigger this trap, though you can, and so can enemies. It's basically just an instant grenade hit, and it wasn't very pleasant trying to test it out. If you have these too close to your structures, it will blow them up. This might be something worth building in a cave, maybe. If you got enemies down the end of a tunnel, you could pull them in or lure them in. That would be cool. Now, you cannot trigger it by any means other than walking over it or an enemy walking over it. Maybe an animal, I don't know. But I tried shooting it with a shotgun, that didn't work. Bow and arrow did not work either. Throwing stones and throwing a Molotov, none of it triggered it, but standing on it did. Pretty average trap, though some people might get a use out of it. It does the exact same damage as a grenade. Yeah. Next I'm going to cover is two new traps as well. The Molotov tripwire and the leaf trap, or is it leaf pile trap? And you can use them in conjunction with each other. It will help the burn length last a bit longer. The Molotov will trigger the leaf pile trap to burn, and then the enemies will burn on top. I have to censor it because YouTube. Now, I was excited to see the leaf pile trap because I thought we could start writing things again and you set it on fire. I tried using a flare. It didn't set it on fire. I thought it would, but a Molotov did. It didn't turn out as good as I thought it would. I think you need to make the letters really, really big for it to work properly or to work nice. I went back through my one I made of the forest, and honestly, the forest one just looked a lot better. They were long, thin lines, so they were easy to make letters with. These are like little circles, so you have to make more, and it's actually quite laggy on the game. Completely redundant. You don't need to do this. Oh, I think it's cool to write things with fire. Don't you? I had this weird glitching thing. You can see all these squares in the textures. I don't know what that was about, but my game wasn't running very well. Now, I tested the leaf pile trap inside a cave against puffies, and it just went bad. They were just running right through it and not even catching on fire. A couple of them did, but 80% of the time they went through it, they did not get caught on fire. I don't know what's going on with this, but honestly, these three new traps are pretty disappointing. Next, I'm going to cover some of the changes made to stones and stone structures. Now, first, the player can now carry up to 4 stones at once and can now place multiple stones at once, as many as currently held. Since most beams and stuff are 4, it will instantly place 4 if you're holding that amount. So no longer placing 1 at a time. It's very cool, this one. They reworked the stone walls so that the upper rows require only 4 stones instead of 5. This is going to save a lot on building. I always found this one to be strange, the inconsistencies and such. Stone beams and floors now use a more subtle place animation. I was trying to find out what this means by just, well, placing it, and it seemed a lot smoother and a little bit more consistent and a little bit more accurate. I don't know how to describe it. It probably plays into the next thing, which is placing stone beam on the ground now displays more accurately where the stone will be placed. I did find this to be true. It seemed to be more consistent and less random. Also, placing a new stone floor will now orient it to the place in front of where the player is aiming instead of the default calculated position, which might be outside the viewport. Now, what I think this means is that often you'll go to place a stone on a stone floor and it would place somewhere behind you or something. I never understood what that meant. They also added a new stone toss animation when adding stones to structures. Now, unfortunately, I have to give a minor spoiler here, but here's one of the new structures. I thought to use this one because it had a lot of stones in it, when I could have just used the fireplace now that I think about it. That was very stupid of me. Just seems more smoother, less rigid. He just flows with the stones, especially when using stone hack. Next one is that the setup combined LOD system and added a 4th LOD to optimize rendering cost of stone floors. What this basically means is that there's another level of detail which is going to help the game run with bigger bases. Especially with stones, they're probably quite cost heavy on the system. It basically means is that your game's going to run better when you've got stone structures, or stone floors as it says. Next is that they've lowered the CPU cost of having lots of idle structures. What I believe this is referring to is that your game was loading structures that could have been on the other side of the map, even if you couldn't see them. The CPU was still rendering them. That's now turned off. So basically the game's going to run a lot better. You'll probably find that this game, Sons of the Forest, runs better than the Forest now. You'll probably get a higher FPS on this one. They've still got a lot to do. I think storage structures haven't been optimized. So if you have a lot of logs and stones and things stored, if your base is lagging, it's probably because of that. But they'll get to it. Next is that the powered cross and leg lamp now have a fixed snap point for the wire. This should make it easier to attach wire to it. Also, I mentioned ages ago when the leg lamp came out that it was kind of stupid. Junkman sent me a message saying that the leg lamp was probably a reference to a movie called A Christmas Story, which had a leg lamp in it, because it did come out right before Christmas. It just went right over my head. And as you can tell, they still produce massive amounts of light, because Ed Knight loves light in this game. Next is that the Flyswatter and Bone-maker traps can now be moved after placed. This is really good. Not a big fan of the Bone-maker one because you have to replace the Molotov in it. The Flyswatter one is really good. It's a very handy trap. You do have to recalibrate it, well, reset it after you've moved it. That is a good thing because otherwise you could just literally drop it on enemies and just kill them with traps without even really doing anything. I did have an issue with the Flyswatter trap, the first one here. It didn't want to be moved. I couldn't place it anywhere. So it was broken, I had to throw it, just make a new one. Next one placed all right though. Next is that they've added a sound effect for when relocating structures. Makes like a dzz noise. I don't know how to spell that. But also blueprint structures that are being relocated will now retain their previous facing direction. So they'll be still facing the same way. Very useful. There should be an option to switch that around though, because they still left blueprints on the player axis instead of the world axis without giving you an option to change. Next is furniture supported by other furniture is now linked, preventing the dismantling of the supporting one. The supported furniture is also destroyed. Basically what this means is that you can no longer make floating stuff with this. If you've got a torch or something attached to a shelf and I destroy the shelf, both will go. Next is that grounded beams, fake pillars, now remove snow around them. Here's an example of what it does. If there's no fake pillar, it won't remove the snow. But it's to prevent snow coming up through the floor, glitching through. It's kind of like grass culling, but for snow. Next is when a structure is dismantled, it can now spawn in bundles of items. Storage will also drop what was stored if it is destroyed. So sticks, for example, come out in bundles of 10. If I destroy a stick holder that's filled with sticks, it will drop 3 bundles of sticks. Also known as no! Now other structures like stones don't come with bundles. It's hard to tell what is coming in a bundle and what isn't. I think it's mainly just sticks from what I can tell. Logs certainly don't, they just explode. Log carts, when they blow up, will create a lot of stick bundles. You don't get any of the items back from the log cart itself or the log sled. I've learned that from driving over those gas things in camps with a log sled or blow up the log sled. It's really annoying. And shells, an example, no bundling of items. It's a good addition though. This is a weird one. I thought I would test it and mention it. Log plank and variants now throw the same orientation as logs. I tested this out and it doesn't seem to do as it says. I don't know what's going on with it. I thought it would make it easier and cleaner to make piles of logs if you're dismantling structures, like pulling up planks. Maybe it does, I'm not sure. Next is another strange one. Structure dismantling is now X instead of C to prevent clashing with adding items to storage. But this isn't the case, you still press C. I think this might have been worded wrong. Maybe it's structure dismantling is now C instead of X to prevent clashing with adding items to storage. I don't know, I could be wrong. I'm trying to think about that and process it in my head. It's not going too well. I'm gonna move on. Next is that they set the structure distortion at 70% of structure's max HP and partial collapse at 20%. What this means is that the building will warp and change shape once it reaches 70%, so it gives you a good indication that structure is damaged. But once it gets to 20%, a piece of it will probably fall off and you'll need to repair it first before you place that piece back on. So it's a good visual indicator. It's useful to know this information. Solar panels can no longer be placed in occluded areas, which is basically underground. Fair enough, they're not going to work down there, but it means you're not going to be able to create power down there because you need to place a solar panel, then place the battery, then hook up the light bulb, for example, but not that useful anyway. Power is very limited in this game, doesn't have much use. Next is that they enabled count readouts on all the items on shelves that are not one-to-one visuals. I don't quite understand what it meant by not one-to-one visuals. There's an easier way to put stuff on shelves, much easier. Next is a bit of a bad one, but stick spikes and electric fences are now more fragile. Starting with stick spikes, they can damage 8 times before they'll break. And as for electric fences, they can damage 6 times before they break. Now, when the electric fence breaks, the wire just falls off. Keep in mind that if you have one wire attached to the whole fence, and one of these gets broken, it will break the whole chain. Electric fences are not very good. You're better off attaching each fence to a solar panel. I don't know why they nerfed these because they didn't feel too good to begin with. It seems like more boring maintenance to fix them up and that of the base. I don't know. Bit disappointing. They were just never that good to begin with. Maybe it's to push players to use other traps. Yeah. Next, I couldn't understand, but placing walls under leaning beams on ground is now possible if they are level. I don't know what the hell this meant, so I decided to make a little staircase that uses the sidewall. If you didn't know you could do that, you can. Now next I'm going to cover stuff to do with the player and the way they obtain warmth and such. Now the first thing I've noticed, and this has probably been in the game for a while, but the altitude that you are at as a player affects the temperature. The higher you go up the mountain, the colder it gets. The lower you go, the warmer it gets. Here's some of the changes they made. They adjusted the rates at which players' skin temperature changes and the rate at which the player gets wet and dries off. The player will now get soaked from snow much slower than in rain. Indoor temperature is now clamped within a range so that indoor temperature is not always the same as outside. Fire sources are now hotter so the player will dry off faster. And they adjusted the amount of rest the player gets indoors and outdoors and how comfort modifies it. So this is a big survival thing overhaul. As you'll see in the footage here, I've got player stats toggled here, which shows all the temperature stuff and some other things. The bit that's covered up by my timeline bar is the race that the player is, which is default white. I don't know what other races there are, but you can see the temperature fluctuating. Now, what is interesting to pass on from this, and this isn't really part of the update video, but I don't know what footage to put in here for a lot of this stuff, is that a house won't keep you warm until it is completely sealed, down to the last log. Every point has to be sealed. It doesn't matter if you've cut windows in each point or if you have a doorway without a door on it. Those things don't affect the temperature. It will still be warm inside. So you don't need to put window sills and all that sort of stuff, but you can if you want. Now the fire torches, they do warm you up, but you have to be standing right next to them. I tested a fire and the range that thing had that kept the house warm was only like 1 block. I don't understand why. It didn't even heat the whole house. If I stand at the end of this 2-block house, I won't be warmed by the fire. You can see the temperature fluctuating. Really bizarre how it works. I tried different clothes as well. They do affect your temperature also. I tried building a bigger house and to see if it was just bugged out, and I tried making a fire. It didn't make a difference. The house didn't warm up. Though you are a lot warmer inside a completely sealed house. You can have as many holes in it as you want, as long as every position is being filled by a log. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, that's enough for this video. This one took forever to make as well. I'm really trying to keep it together, as you can imagine. In the next video, I'm going to cover enemies and the rest of the stuff without spoilers. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Cheers.